What if the boy who dreamed of saving everyone became the one everyone feared? 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya walks into a doctor's office quirkless and walks out with the power of the King of Curses. This isn't the crybaby Deku you know. This is a monster who chooses to save people anyway. Welcome to a My Hero Academia where enemies don't get second chances. Classmates fear their friend, and the line between hero and villain is written in blood. You think you know Izuku Midoriya. Think again.
Welcome, Legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you've got an idea for the next part or a brand new what if you want to see, drop it in the comments below. And if you're enjoying the ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap that bell so you never miss an upload. Now, let's jump straight into the story.
The world is not fair. Izuku Midoriya learned this lesson earlier than most. At 4 years old, in a sterile white room that smelled of antiseptic and shattered dreams, the doctor's words fell like stones, crushing the vibrant, colorful future he had painted in his mind. "I'm sorry, kid. It's not going to happen." The X-ray on the light box told the story. 2 joints in his pinky toe, a relic of a bygone era, a biological marker for quirklessness. In a world where 80% of the population possessed some extraordinary ability, Izuku was a blank slate, a forgotten page in humanity's evolutionary tale. His mother's apologies, whispered through her own tears that night, were a balm that did little to soothe the gaping wound in his heart. The video of All Might, his idol, the symbol of peace, saving hundreds with a booming laugh and an indomitable smile, now played like a cruel joke. He could never be that. He could never save people with a smile because he had nothing to smile with. The tears came, hot and endless, soaking his pillow as he cried himself into restless sleep, the dream of heroism dying before it ever had a chance to live. A week later, another letter arrived. It was from the same clinic, a follow-up appointment. His mother, Inko, read it with a furrowed brow. A routine check for potential late-onset quirk factors in genetically recessive individuals, she murmured, the medical jargon a confusing but hopeful melody. Perhaps the first diagnosis was wrong. Perhaps there was still a chance. That sliver of hope was enough to have Izuku putting on his little red shoes with a flicker of his old energy, his heart thumping a nervous rhythm against his ribs. The doctor was the same man, a portly figure with oversized glasses and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. Dr. Kyudai Garaki. He spoke in calming, reassuring tones, explaining that sometimes in rare cases like Izuku's, a catalyst was needed. "We've developed a specialized vitamin supplement," he explained, holding up a syringe filled with a fluid that was anything but vitamin-colored. It was a deep, viscous black, swirling with a faint, crimson light like a trapped nebula. "It's a new experimental treatment designed to stimulate dormant quirk factors. It's perfectly safe, of course." Inko was hesitant, her maternal instincts screaming that something was wrong. The fluid looked malevolent. But the hope for her son, the desire to see his bright, happy smile again, was a powerful anesthetic. She looked at Izuku, whose eyes were wide with a desperate, pleading hope. She relented. If you're sure it's safe." "Absolutely," Dr. Garaki said, his smile widening a fraction. He turned to Izuku, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Ready to be a hero, little man?" Izuku nodded, his entire body trembling as he offered his small, trembling arm. He squeezed his eyes shut as the needle pierced his skin. He felt a coldness spread through his veins, a chilling sensation that was immediately followed by a searing, unbearable heat. It felt like his blood was boiling, like his very cells were being torn apart and stitched back together in a new, terrifying pattern. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore from his throat, a sound no 4-year-old should ever make. And then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. Izuku's ragged breaths were the only sound. He opened his eyes. The tears were gone. The fear was gone. The trembling, hopeful little boy was gone. In his place was something else. His green eyes, once wide and innocent, now held a sharp, ancient intelligence. He sat up on the examination table, his posture no longer slumped with insecurity, but ramrod straight, radiating an unnerving confidence. "What "What was that?" Inko whispered, rushing to his side, her hands hovering over him, afraid to touch. Izuku didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on Dr. Garaki. The doctor was sweating, his professional mask cracking to reveal a flicker of genuine fear mixed with ecstatic fascination. The subject is responding faster than anticipated. "Subject," Inko repeated, her voice rising in panic. Izuku slowly lifted his right hand, examining it with a detached curiosity, as if it were a new and interesting tool. He flexed his fingers. He felt it now, a vast, dark ocean of power churning within him, an energy that was both a part of him and alien to him. It hummed with a predatory hunger, a desire to cut, to dismantle, to dominate. He felt an instinct, a piece of knowledge he shouldn't have, bubble to the surface of his consciousness. Dismantle. He flicked his wrist, a casual dismissive gesture aimed at the stainless steel examination table. There was no sound, no flash of light, but a perfect, impossibly thin line appeared across the metal surface. A second later, the top half of the table slid sideways and crashed to the floor with a deafening clang, sheared in two as if by a divine blade. Inko screamed, stumbling backward. Dr. Garaki's jaw dropped, his glasses sliding down his nose. His fear was instantly replaced by a greedy, triumphant glee. Incredible! The cursed energy has bonded perfectly. A complete success. Izuku ignored them both. He looked at the severed table, then back at his hand. A slow, thin smile spread across his lips. It wasn't the bright, sunny smile of the boy who wanted to be all might. It was a sharp, predatory grin that promised nothing but pain. He finally turned his gaze to the doctor, his eyes narrowing. The man flinched, taking an involuntary step back from the 4-year-old child who was now looking at him not as a patient, but as prey. The hierarchy in the room had irrevocably shifted. The weak, crying child was gone. In his place sat a king on a broken throne of steel. The years that followed were a study in transformation. The Izuku Midoriya who returned to Aldera Junior High's ecosystem one who had left. The quiet, stuttering boy who flinched at every loud noise and offered apologies for simply existing was gone, replaced by a figure of quiet, unnerving intensity. He no longer hunched his shoulders. He walked with a straight-backed confidence that dared anyone to challenge him. His eyes, once perpetually downcast, now met every gaze with a piercing, analytical stare that seemed to see right through people, weighing and measuring them in an instant. He didn't need to train his newfound power in the conventional sense. The knowledge was simply there, an innate part of him, like breathing. In the seclusion of the woods behind his apartment complex, or amidst the mountains of trash at Dagobah Municipal Beach Park, he practiced. He learned the names that whispered in the back of his mind. Dismantle, the invisible blade that could sever anything. Cleave, a more nuanced cut, one that could adjust its intensity based on the target's durability and his own will. He learned to sheath his body in the dark. Humming energy, cursed energy, the instincts told him, making himself stronger, faster, more durable than any normal human. He was a prodigy of destruction, a natural-born calamity. His relationship with his mother became a delicate dance of love and fear. Inko saw her son excelling, growing confident, no longer coming home with bruises and tear-streaked cheeks. She was proud of his strength. But she also saw the coldness in his eyes, the way he sometimes looked at a news report of a villain attack with a chillingly detached interest. She would find him in his room, muttering to himself, not with the frantic energy of a fanboy, but with the cold calculation of a strategist dissecting a problem. He was her son, but he was also a stranger living in her house, a loving, respectful stranger who could kill a man with a flick of his wrist. The most dramatic shift, however, was in his relationship with Katsuki Bakugo. For years, Bakugo had been the apex predator of their small social circle. His explosive quirk and arrogant personality made him the undisputed king. Izuku, the quirkless, useless Deku, was his favorite punching bag, a whetstone upon which he sharpened his own ego. The day after Izuku's awakening, Bakugo and his 2 cronies cornered him behind the school as they had done 100 times before. "Still think you can be a hero, you useless Deku?" Bakugo sneered, small explosions popping in his palms. "You're less than nothing. You're a pebble on the side of the road." The old Izuku would have flinched, would have stammered an apology. This Izuku simply stood there, his hands in his pockets, an unreadable expression on his face. He tilted his head slightly. A pebble? That's not very creative, Katsuki. The use of his first name, spoken with such casual disregard, set Bakugo's teeth on edge. What did you say to me? He snarled, stepping forward. You've finally grown a spine? Let me snap it for you. He lunged, his right hand crackling, aiming a small explosion at Izuku's shoulder. Izuku didn't move. He just watched Bakugo's approach with those unnervingly calm eyes. Just before the blow landed, he sighed, a sound of pure boredom. He raised his hand, not to block, but to point a single finger at the ground just in front of Bakugo's feet. Dismantle. An invisible force erupted. The concrete beneath Bakugo's feet split apart with a sharp crack, a deep, perfectly straight line carved into the pavement. Bakugo's lunge was thrown off balance, and he stumbled, falling to his hands and knees. He stared at the clean, deep gash in the ground, then back at Izuku, his mind refusing to process what had just happened. There was no sound, no impact, just a cut. What was that? One of his cronies stammered, his face pale. Izuku's gaze flickered to him. Stay out of this. The words were quiet, but they carried a weight that made the boy freeze in place. He then looked down at the kneeling Bakugo. You talk a lot about strength, Katsuki, Izuku said, his voice devoid of emotion. But you don't understand it. Your power is loud. It's messy. It's like a child throwing a tantrum. Real strength, real power is quiet. It's efficient. He took a step forward, and for the first time in his life, Katsuki Bakugo felt a primal, instinctual fear. He scrambled backward, away from the boy he had tormented for a decade. Izuku stopped, looking down at him with something that might have been pity or perhaps just contempt. Get up, Katsuki. You're embarrassing yourself. From that day on, everything changed. The whispers in the hallways were no longer about the quirkless Deku. They were about the creepy Deku. The boy who stared down Bakugo. The boy who nobody saw get a quirk, but who radiated an aura of danger that kept everyone at a distance. He became an outcast, not because he was weak, but because he was terrifying. The isolation that once came from pity now came from fear, and Izuku found, to his own surprise, that he preferred it this way. It was less complicated. His internal world was a constant negotiation. The power that flowed through him was inherently destructive. It reveled in violence, in domination. It was the power of a tyrant, a demon king from a forgotten age named Sukuna, a name that echoed in the deepest recesses of his mind. Yet, the core of Izuku Midoriya, the boy who cried watching heroes save people, was still there. He still wanted to save people. He just no longer believed in the smiling, theatrical version of heroism sold to the masses. The world was full of threats. Villains were a disease, and you didn't reason with a disease. You didn't punch it until it promised to be good. You cut it out. Permanently. He was 12 when he first put this philosophy into practice. He was walking home, taking a shortcut through a deserted alleyway when he heard a scream. A low-level villain, a man with a minor gigantification quirk that made his fists disproportionately large, had a woman pinned against the wall, demanding her purse. She was crying, begging him to let her go. The old Izuku would have frozen or perhaps run for a pro hero. The new Izuku simply walked into the alley, his school bag slung over his shoulder. Hey, the villain grunted, turning to face him. Get lost, kid. This ain't your business. Izuku dropped his bag. Let her go. The villain laughed, a wheezing, unpleasant sound. Or what? You gonna cry at me? He took a step toward Izuku, raising one of his oversized fists. I'm gonna enjoy smashing that stupid look off your face. The woman screamed for Izuku to run, but he didn't move. He just watched the villain approach, his expression unchanged. I gave you a chance, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The villain swung his massive fist. Izuku's hand moved, a blur too fast to see. Cleave. The villain's arm, from the elbow down, separated from his body in a spray of blood. It fell to the ground with a wet thud. The villain stared at his stump, his brain taking a full second to register the pain. Then he shrieked, a high, piercing sound of agony and terror. Izuku stepped past him, his shoes splashing in the spreading pool of blood. He offered a hand to the terrified woman. Are you all right? She could only stare, her eyes wide with horror, looking from the screaming, bleeding villain to the calm, blood-spattered child in front of her. She nodded numbly, grabbed her purse, and ran from the alley without a word. Izuku turned back to the villain, who was clutching his arm, sobbing on the ground. You're a threat, Izuku stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. Threats need to be eliminated. It's the most efficient way to ensure they don't harm anyone else. He raised his hand again. The villain's eyes widened in comprehension and terror. No, please, wait. Dismantle. A series of invisible cuts, silent and instantaneous, crisscrossed the villain's body. He fell apart into neat, bloodless pieces, like a mannequin disassembled for storage. The screaming stopped. The alley was silent again, save for the distant city sounds. Izuku looked at what he had done. There was no guilt, no remorse. There was a quiet, cold satisfaction. The threat was gone. The world was marginally safer. He picked up his school bag, carefully stepping around the remains, and continued his walk home, his mind already moving on. He had homework to do. The day of the UA high school entrance exam arrived. For 10 months, Izuku had watched from a distance as All Might, in his skeletal form, trained a new protege at Dagobah Beach. He recognized the boy as Katsuki Bakugo. It was interesting. All Might, the symbol of peace, had chosen the arrogant, explosive bully as his successor. Izuku had felt a flicker of something, not jealousy, but a grim amusement. The world's greatest hero had pinned his hopes on a walking powder keg. It was fitting for a society that valued flashy power over quiet efficiency. Izuku had no need for such training. His power was already refined, his body already honed to a superhuman degree by the constant flow of cursed energy. He arrived at the UA gates not with the nervous excitement of the other applicants, but with the calm assurance of a predator entering a new hunting ground. His presence was a palpable thing, a bubble of cold pressure that made other students give him a wide berth. He saw Bakugo in the crowd, looking stronger, more focused, but still radiating that same desperate need for validation. Their eyes met for a moment. Bakugo's gaze was a mixture of hatred and grudging fear. Izuku's was utterly blank. The written portion of the exam was trivial. His own analytical mind, already sharp, was now augmented by the cold, tactical genius that came with his power. He finished with half the time remaining, laying his pen down with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silent, focused room. Then came the practical exam. In the massive auditorium, Present Mike explained the rules. A simulated city filled with robotic villains of varying point values. The goal was to score as many points as possible. As the other students chattered nervously, planning strategies, Izuku simply stretched his neck, a faint cracking sound breaking the tension. He could feel them, the metal shells and whirring gears of the robots scattered throughout the cityscape. They were just objects. Obstacles. When the massive gates began to open, the other applicants waited for the signal. Izuku didn't. A real battle doesn't have a countdown. He muttered to himself, and then he was gone, a green blur disappearing into the city before Present Mike could even shout, "Go!" "Hey, what's the big idea? There are no countdowns in a real fight." Present Mike's voice boomed over the speakers, validating Izuku's actions. The other students, shocked out of their stupor, scrambled to follow. But Izuku was already at work. He didn't bother with flashy punches or kicks. He walked through the streets at a steady pace, his hands in his pockets. A one-point robot lunged from an alley. Izuku didn't even look at it. He flicked his wrist. Dismantle. The robot's head flew from its shoulders and its body crumpled. A pair of two-pointers swarmed him. Another casual gesture, and they were bisected, falling into 4 neat pieces. He was a reaper strolling through a field of wheat. There was no effort, no struggle, just a calm, methodical, and terrifyingly efficient process of destruction. In the observation room, the UA faculty watched in stunned silence. "Who is this kid?" Midnight asked, her eyes wide. "His quirk? I can't even see it." "His name is Izuku Midoriya," Aizawa said, his gaze locked on the screen, his analytical mind racing. "His file says he's quirkless." All Might, in his skeletal form, leaned closer to the monitor, a deep unease settling in his gut. That energy, it was dark, ancient. It felt nothing like a quirk. It felt like the antithesis of One for All. It felt wrong. On the screen, Izuku was racking up an impossible score. 60, 70, 80 points. He wasn't just destroying villains. He was doing it with a surgical precision that was more unnerving than any explosive display of power. He moved with a purpose that bordered on bloodlust, yet his face remained utterly calm. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The earth cracked and buildings trembled. The 0-point robot, a colossal machine taller than the highest skyscraper in the mock city, rose from the ground, its single red eye glowing with menace. It was an obstacle, not an enemy, designed to make students panic and flee, and they did. The other applicants screamed and ran, a tide of terror flowing away from the mechanical titan. Izuku, however, simply stopped and looked up. He saw the robot, a mountain of steel and circuits. But he also saw something else. A girl with brown hair and rosy cheeks was trapped under a pile of rubble, right in the robot's path. Her name was Ochako Uraraka, and she was about to be crushed. The other students were running for their lives. The pro heroes in the observation room held their breath. This was a test of heroism. Would anyone turn back? Izuku sighed. It was inefficient to engage such a large target. There were no points in it. But leaving her to die was also inefficient. A potential future hero eliminated by a training exercise, a waste of resources. His core belief, the one thing that remained of the old Izuku, flared to life: save people. His methods were just different. He saw Bakugo in the distance, momentarily frozen before turning to run with the others. He saw the blue-haired engine-legged boy from the orientation, Tenya Ida, also fleeing. They were all thinking of their own scores, their own survival. Izuku started walking toward the zero-pointer. "What is he doing?" Present Mike yelled. "He's going to get himself killed." Izuku clasped his hands together, forming a strange, intricate seal with his fingers. The cursed energy within him surged, a black tide rising to an unprecedented level. The air around him grew heavy, thick with a palpable sense of dread. The sky above him seemed to darken. "Domain expansion," he whispered, the words feeling ancient and powerful on his tongue. "Malevolent shrine." In an instant, the world warped. A massive, skeletal structure erupted from the ground around him, a grotesque shrine of bones and dark wood dedicated to some forgotten, malevolent deity. It formed a 200-meter radius circle, a bounded field of absolute power with Izuku at its epicenter. Uraraka and the zero-pointer were well within its bounds. The zero-pointer raised its massive fist to crush him. It never had the chance. Inside the domain, the rules of reality were rewritten. Izuku didn't need to aim. He didn't need to gesture. His will was absolute. An infinite, unending storm of invisible slashes, both dismantle and cleave, manifested simultaneously throughout the entire area. The colossal robot was hit by everything, everywhere, all at once. It wasn't cut. It was erased. In a fraction of a second, the mountain of steel was diced into microscopic fragments, dissolving into a cloud of metallic dust that rained down within the domain's barrier. The only things left untouched were Izuku himself and the ground directly beneath Ochako Uraraka. The shrine dissipated as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a perfect circle of scorched earth and a fine layer of metal dust. The other applicants, who had been running away, stopped and stared back in utter, disbelieving silence. The monster that had terrified them moments ago was simply gone. Izuku walked over to the rubble, pinning Uraraka. He placed a hand on the massive chunk of concrete and, reinforcing his arm with cursed energy, lifted it as if it were made of styrofoam. He tossed it aside. He looked down at the girl, who was staring up at him with wide, terrified eyes. "You should be more careful," he said, his voice flat. He turned and walked away, leaving her in the silent, empty street. The buzzer sounded, signaling the end of the exam. The results were posted a week later. Izuku Midoriya had scored first. He had 92 villain points, a record-breaking number. But what shocked everyone, especially the faculty, was the second number next to his name, 60 rescue points, the highest rescue score ever awarded. He had saved someone while displaying a power so terrifying, so overwhelmingly destructive that it defied comprehension. In his office, All Might stared at the recording of the exam, his face grim. He had found a successor in young Bakugo, a boy with the spirit of a winner, someone he could mold. But this other boy, Izuku Midoriya, he hadn't just passed the exam. He had dominated it. He had shown the tactical mind of a seasoned pro, the power of a natural disaster, and the chilling demeanor of a killer. "Toshinori," Principal Nezu said, sipping his tea as he watched the footage of Malevolent Shrine for the 10th time. "This boy is not just a hero candidate. He is a paradigm shift, and I am not entirely certain if that is a good thing." All Might could only nod, a cold dread coiling in his stomach. He had spent his life fighting a great evil, a man who stole quirks and commanded the darkness. And now, a boy with a power that felt like it was born from that same darkness was about to walk through the doors of his alma mater. The future of heroism had just become terrifyingly uncertain. The first day at UA High was exactly as Izuku expected. The other students in Class 1A were a mix of awe, ambition, and barely concealed fear. They all remembered the entrance exam. They remembered the boy who walked calmly into the fray and the colossal robot that vanished into thin air. When Izuku entered the classroom, conversations died down. He ignored the stares, taking a seat and observing his new classmates with a detached, analytical gaze. He saw Uraraka, who flinched when their eyes met. He saw Ida, who looked at him with a mixture of disapproval and grudging respect. And he saw Bakugo, who was practically vibrating with rage. His pride still wounded from being so thoroughly overshadowed. Their homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa, a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week, wasted no time on pleasantries. He herded them out to the training grounds for a quirk apprehension test. It was a logical, if ruthless, method of gauging their potential. Aizawa's threat of expelling the student who ranked last sent a ripple of panic through the class. Izuku, however, was unfazed. This was just another set of metrics, another opportunity to gather data. The tests were simple physical assessments: a 50-meter dash, a grip strength test, a standing long jump, and so on. For the other students, it was a chance to show off the creative applications of their quirks. For Izuku, it was trivial. In the 50-meter dash, he simply reinforced his legs with cursed energy and crossed the line in just over 3 seconds, a blur of motion that left even the speedy Ida in his dust. In the grip strength test, he wrapped his hand in the dark energy and crushed the dynamometer, causing it to short out with a pathetic fizzle. He cleared the sandbox in the long jump without a running start and sent the ball in the softball throw so far that Aizawa's tracking device couldn't even register the distance, simply displaying an infinity symbol. With each test, the gap between Izuku and his peers became more apparent. He wasn't just first, he was operating on a completely different level. He exerted minimal effort for maximum results, his expression never changing from one of mild boredom. The other students looked on with a growing sense of dread. Bakugo, in particular, was seething. He had trained for 10 months with all might, pushing his body to its limits, only to watch the quirkless, useless Deku outperform him without breaking a sweat. Finally, it was Bakugo's turn for the ball throw. "Die!" he screamed, launching the ball with a massive explosion, a cathartic release of all his frustration. It landed an impressive 705, 2 meters away. He grinned, a wild, triumphant look on his face, only to see Izuku looking at his nails, completely unimpressed. The final straw for Aizawa came during the test. He had been watching Izuku with a growing sense of alarm. This wasn't a quirk. It didn't operate like one. There was no biological mechanism he could identify, just a raw, oppressive energy that seemed to bend the world to the boy's will. As Izuku stepped up for a final test, Aizawa decided to act. "Midoriya," he said, his voice a low growl. His eyes flashed red, his long black hair levitating around his head as he activated his quirk, Erasure. "I am erasing your power. Let's see what you can do now." The class gasped. Aizawa's Erasure could nullify any quirk. This would be the moment they finally saw Midoriya on an even playing field. Izuku stopped. He slowly turned his head to look at Aizawa. The oppressive aura around him didn't diminish in the slightest. He raised an eyebrow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "You think that works on me?" He held up his hand, and a small, dense ball of black and red cursed energy swirled into existence above his palm, crackling with power. "As I believe I mentioned on my application, I'm quirkless." He closed his fist and the ball of energy dissipated. "This isn't a quirk, it's just me. You can't erase what's fundamentally a part of my body, any more than you could erase the blood in my veins." Aizawa's eyes widened in shock. It was true. His quirk had no effect. This boy's power was from an entirely different source, something outside the known spectrum of human abilities. This made him not just powerful, but dangerous, uncontrollable. "What are you?" Aizawa asked, his voice low and serious. Izuku just smiled, that same thin, unnerving smile. "I'm the guy who's going to be the #1 hero." When the final results were posted, Izuku's name was at the top of the list, so far ahead of second place that it was laughable. At the bottom was Minoru Mineta, who burst into tears at the thought of being expelled. By the way, the expulsion thing was a logical deception. Aizawa said with a tired sigh, a sadistic grin spreading across his face. It was to push you to your limits. The class erupted in relieved shouts, all except for Momo Yaoyorozu, who had seen through the ruse. Izuku just shrugged. It didn't matter to him either way. But as the class headed back inside, Aizawa stopped him. Midoriya. A word. The other students scurried away, leaving the two of them alone on the field. I don't know what your power is or where it comes from, Aizawa said, his gaze intense. But I know it's dangerous. Overwhelming power with no restraint is a greater liability than weakness. I'll be watching you. One wrong move, one step over the line, and I will have you expelled and classified as a potential threat. Am I clear? Izuku met his teacher's gaze without flinching. The intimidation tactic was wasted on him. Perfectly. But you're wrong about one thing. And what's that? I have perfect restraint, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. If I didn't, you wouldn't be standing here, threatening me. You'd just be a red stain on the ground. He turned and walked away, leaving Aizawa standing alone, a cold chill running down his spine for the first time in years. He had faced down armies of villains, but the quiet, confident threat from a 15-year-old boy was somehow more terrifying than any of them. He was beginning to think that expelling Izuku wasn't a threat yet, but a potential necessity for the safety of everyone at the school. The next day brought the Foundational Heroics class, taught by the one and only All Might. The man burst into the room in his Silver Age costume, all booming voice and charismatic energy. The class was ecstatic. Izuku was unimpressed. He saw the facade, the forced smile, and behind it, he could sense the flickering, dying ember of the man's true power. This icon was a hollow shell, running on fumes. The lesson for the day was the battle trial, a 2v2 indoor combat exercise, heroes versus villains. Izuku was paired with Ochako Uraraka, the girl he had saved during the entrance exam. She still seemed terrified of him, which was an inconvenience. Their opponents were Tenya Ida, playing the part of a villain with meticulous if stiff dedication and a fuming Katsuki Bakugo. For Bakugo, this was it. This was his chance to prove himself, to put Deku back in his place, to show him that all the power in the world couldn't stand up to his talent, his rage, his drive. He was going to destroy him. As they prepared, Uraraka approached Izuku nervously. So, Midoriya, what's the plan? You're super strong, so you should probably just go and, Izuku cut her off, his gaze fixed on the monitor showing Bakugo's feral grin. That's inefficient. Bakugo is coming for me and only me. He's predictable. His pride is his biggest weakness. You are going to find the weapon. I am going to deal with them. Don't engage, just focus on the objective. His instructions were clear, concise, and left no room for argument. He was treating this not as a partnership, but as a mission with him in command. But what about you? She asked. I'll be fine, he said, a hint of something dark and dangerous in his tone. I'm actually looking forward to this. The trial began. As predicted, Bakugo immediately abandoned his post and his partner, rocketing through the hallways with a single-minded purpose. Deku, where are you? Come out and face me! Izuku met him in a narrow corridor. He stood perfectly still as Bakugo came flying at him, explosions propelling him forward. I've got you now, you quirkless wannabe, Bakugo screamed, unleashing a powerful right hook. Izuku sidestepped it with fluid ease. Bakugo's fist smashed into the wall behind him. Izuku didn't retaliate. He just watched. Your movements are too wide, Katsuki. You telegraph every attack. All that power, and you still fight like a street brawler. The calm, condescending analysis was like gasoline on a fire. Bakugo roared in frustration, unleashing a relentless barrage of explosive attacks. Izuku moved like a phantom, weaving and dodging through the onslaught without ever taking a step back. He wasn't even using his hands. He was treating Bakugo, the top student All Might himself had chosen, like a clumsy child. In the observation room, the other students were speechless. He's not even fighting back, Kirishima muttered. He's just toying with him. All Might watched with a heavy heart. He had told Bakugo not to let his pride get the better of him, but the boy wasn't listening. And Midoriya, young Midoriya, was systematically dismantling him, not physically, but mentally. I'm gonna use it, Deku, Bakugo yelled, raising his massive grenade-like gauntlet. He had been storing his sweat, building up a massive charge. This has enough power to blow this whole floor to bits. Bakugo, stop! You'll kill him! All Might yelled into the comms. He'll be fine if he dodges. Bakugo screamed back, his finger on the trigger. Izuku just sighed. So loud. He raised a single hand. As Bakugo pulled the pin, unleashing a colossal, building-shaking explosion that filled the entire corridor with fire and smoke, Izuku whispered one word. Cleave. He didn't target Bakugo. He targeted the gauntlet. The explosion roared past him, harmlessly deflected by a thin, invisible barrier of cursed energy he had erected. When the smoke cleared, Bakugo was standing there, his arm outstretched, his eyes wide with shock. His gauntlet, the pride of his hero costume, had been perfectly sliced into a dozen pieces that now fell to the floor with a series of metallic clinks. The cut had been so precise, so impossibly sharp, that it hadn't even scratched the fabric of his glove underneath. Izuku stood there, completely unharmed, his clothes not even singed. "Is that all you have?" he asked, his voice flat. "A toy that lets you make a bigger tantrum?" That broke something in Bakugo. The rage, the pride, the sheer force of will that had driven him his entire life crumbled in the face of such overwhelming casual superiority. He was nothing. His ultimate move, his trump card, had been neutralized like a child's plaything. "While you were screaming your head off," Izuku said, tapping his earpiece, "Uraraka secured the weapon. We win." From the comms, Uraraka's cheerful voice confirmed it. "I've got it. Hero team wins." Izuku walked past the frozen, trembling Bakugo, not even giving him a second glance. As he passed, he spoke one last time, his voice low. "You'll never beat me, Katsuki. Not because you're weak, but because you're looking at the wrong mountain. I'm already on a peak you can't even see." The trial ended. Izuku and Uraraka were declared the victors. In the post-match analysis, All Might tried to praise their teamwork, but the words felt hollow. Everyone had seen what happened. It wasn't teamwork. It was a master using a pawn to achieve a goal while he single-handedly dismantled the opposition. Bakugo was silent for the rest of the day. He had been defeated before, but this was different. He had been humiliated. He had been shown that the boy he had called useless his entire life was so far beyond him that he wasn't even considered a rival. His world, built on the foundation of his own strength and superiority, had been shattered into a million pieces. And in its place was the terrifying, undeniable reality of Izuku Midoriya. The bus ride to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, was noisy. The students of Class 1A, buoyed by the excitement of their first off-campus training exercise, chattered away. Izuku sat by a window, staring out at the passing scenery, ignoring the conversations around him. Tsuyu Asui, the frog-like girl, turned to him, her expression characteristically blunt. "Midoriya-chan," she said, "your quirk is a lot like All Might's in terms of pure power, but it's also really scary. Kero." Kirishima chimed in, flexing. "Yeah, man, it's super strong, but it's not very flashy. But a real man can appreciate that kind of power." Izuku didn't turn. "It's not a quirk," he stated simply, a sentence he was already getting tired of repeating. The conversation died around him, the mood shifting under the weight of his cold finality. He preferred the silence. They arrived at the massive dome facility, greeted by the space hero, 13. As the hero began their lecture on rescue training and the dangers of quirks, the lights in the facility flickered and died. The central fountain sputtered. A swirling vortex of black and purple mist opened up in the center of the plaza below, and from it, people began to emerge. Dozens of them. Villains. Aizawa's reaction was instantaneous. 13. Protect the students. These are real villains." A man covered in disembodied hands, his face obscured, stepped forward from the portal. This was Tomura Shigaraki. "We went to all the trouble of crashing the party, and All Might isn't even here," he rasped, scratching his neck with a manic energy. "Maybe if we kill a few kids, he'll show up." The man made of mist, Kurogiri, expanded his form. "My duty is to scatter you and torture you to death." Before the mist could envelop the class, Izuku acted. He had sensed them the moment the portal opened. Dozens of weak, insignificant presences and 3 stronger ones. One was the Mist Man, one was the hand-covered leader, and the third, a hulking beast standing silently in the back, radiated a power that was hollow and artificial. As Kurogiri's mist billowed towards them, Izuku moved. He wasn't trying to escape, he was moving towards the threat. He vaulted over the railing, landing lightly on the staircase below, positioning himself between his class and the approaching army. "What is he doing?" Ida shouted. Aizawa, already leaping down to engage the mob, glanced back in shock. Midoriya, get back with the others. Izuku ignored him. He looked at the horde of low-level thugs charging forward. They were a nuisance, a problem to be solved quickly and efficiently. You're all in the way, he said, his voice carrying an unnatural calm. He raised his hand. Dismantle. It wasn't a single cut, it was a wave. A wide, invisible scythe that swept through the plaza. The first 20 villains in the charging mob didn't even have time to scream. They just fell apart. Some were bisected at the waist, others lost limbs, a few were decapitated. It was an instantaneous, silent, and utterly brutal massacre. The villains behind them skidded to a halt, their faces masks of pure horror, staring at the dismembered bodies of their comrades. The students on the stairs above gasped in unison. Uraraka covered her mouth, a choked sob escaping her lips. Todoroki's eyes widened, his usual stoicism broken. Even Bakugo stared, his fists clenched, a cold sweat on his brow. They had seen him fight, but this was slaughter. Aizawa, who had been about to engage the mob himself, froze mid-stride. He had been prepared for a brawl, a tough fight against overwhelming numbers. He was not prepared for his student to commit mass murder in the blink of an eye. Shigaraki stopped scratching his neck. His visible eye widened, a slow, twisted grin spreading across his face. Well, now? What's this? You're no hero, are you? You're just like me. Izuku's gaze flickered from the pile of bodies to Shigaraki. Don't compare me to you. You're just a destructive child. I'm a savior. He started walking down the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly silent plaza. The remaining villains, terrified, scrambled backward away from the approaching Angel of Death. Get him! Kill him! Shigaraki shrieked, his fascination turning to rage. Nomu! The hulking, bird-faced creature at his side let out a guttural roar and charged. It moved with impossible speed, its fist cocked back to deliver a blow with the force of a freight train. It was the creature designed to kill All Might. Izuku met the charge head-on. He reinforced his body with cursed energy as the Nomu's fist connected with his forearm, which he'd raised to block. The impact was immense, a shockwave that cracked the stone floor beneath them. Izuku was sent skidding backward, his shoes carving grooves in the ground, but he held his ground. The Nomu's power was immense, but unrefined. All brute force, no technique. So this is your trump card, Izuku said, his arm throbbing from the impact. He looked at the Nomu's exposed brain, its unblinking eyes. It's powerful, but it's just a puppet. He pushed back and the real fight began. It was a clash of monsters. The Nomu swung with wild, powerful blows that could shatter concrete, and Izuku moved with a fluid, deadly grace, weaving around the attacks and retaliating with precise, devastating strikes. He used cleave, adapting the slashes to the Nomu's shock-absorbing body. Slices of flesh were carved from the beast, but it didn't seem to feel pain. Its wounds healed almost instantly, the flesh bubbling and regenerating. It's no use, Shigaraki cackled. Nomu has super regeneration and shock absorption. You can't beat him. Izuku was punched, hard, sending him flying through a stone wall. He landed in a heap of rubble, a piece of rebar sticking through his shoulder. The students cried out in alarm. Aizawa started to move, but before he could, Izuku stood up. He looked at the wound in his shoulder, then grabbed the rebar and pulled it out with a sickening squelch. The gaping hole in his shoulder, flesh, and muscle began to knit itself back together. Steam rose from the wound as it sealed completely in a matter of seconds, leaving no scar. Reverse curse technique. The power to create positive energy from negative, the ultimate form of healing. Regeneration? Izuku said, his voice echoing from the rubble. He stepped out, completely unharmed. I can do that too. Shigaraki's jaw went slack. This wasn't possible. This kid, he was a monster. He was a final boss who had shown up at the start of the game. Izuku had gathered enough data. The Nomu was strong, it was fast, and it could regenerate. A direct assault was inefficient. It was time to end this. He clasped his hands together once more. Oh no, Aizawa muttered, recognizing the hand seal from the entrance exam footage. The oppressive, dreadful energy flooded the USJ once more. Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. The skeletal structure erupted, trapping Shigaraki, Kurogiri, the Nomu, and the few remaining villains within its 200-meter radius. Shigaraki looked around in terror, the air thick with guaranteed death. What is this? What is this power? He screamed. The Nomu charged again, but it was useless. The infinite storm of dismantle and cleave descended. The beast, designed to withstand any punch from All Might, was instantly shredded from every conceivable angle. Its regeneration couldn't keep up with the sheer volume of destruction. It was sliced into ribbons, then into chunks, then into dust, erased from existence in less time than it took to breathe. The other low-level villains caught in the domain suffered the same fate, vanishing into a red mist. The domain dissipated. Izuku stood in the center of the scorched circle, breathing slightly heavier than before. The technique took a toll, but the result was undeniable. The only enemies left standing were a terrified Shigaraki and a stunned Kurogiri. It was at that moment that the doors to the USJ were blown open. "I am here," All Might announced, his face a mask of heroic fury. But the fury faltered as he took in the scene. There was no army of villains. There was no giant monster. There was only his student, Izuku Midoriya, standing in a field of carnage, surrounded by the faint smell of ozone and blood. Aizawa was still at the top of the stairs, his scarf limp, having not thrown a single punch. The rest of the class was huddled behind 13, looking down at their classmate with a mixture of awe and absolute terror. Aizawa had been injured, but not by the villains. A stray, invisible slash from the edge of Izuku's initial wave attack had grazed his arm as he was protecting Tsuyu, who had been knocked off balance. A thin, deep cut was bleeding freely, a stark reminder that Izuku's power was indiscriminate as it was deadly. Shigaraki, seeing his chance, pointed a trembling finger at Izuku. You're the real monster." Then he turned to Kurogiri. "Get us out of here!" The mist portal opened and the two remaining villains vanished, leaving All Might to confront the deeply unsettling aftermath. He looked at the blood, the scorch marks, and the student who stood at the center of it all, looking more like a conqueror than a hero in training. The moral line that all heroes were sworn to uphold had not just been crossed, it had been obliterated, and All Might had no idea what to do about it. The UA Sports Festival was the biggest stage in Japan. It was a chance for aspiring heroes to showcase their abilities to the world, to pro heroes, and to the entire nation. For most, it was a gateway to a bright future. For Izuku Midoriya, it was simply a platform. The events of the USJ had been heavily censored. The official story was that All Might and the other teachers had handily defeated the villains. But within UA, the truth was known. The students of Class 1A knew what they had seen. They knew that Izuku hadn't just defeated the villains, he had executed them with terrifying efficiency. He was no longer just the intimidating, powerful kid. He was a killer. They kept their distance, their fear now mixed with a heavy dose of dread. When the time came for the student representative's speech, everyone expected it to be Katsuki Bakugo, who had placed first in the entrance exam's hero portion if one discounted Izuku's anomalous scores. But the honor went to the overall top scorer, Izuku. He walked to the microphone, his footsteps echoing in the massive stadium. He looked out at the thousands of faces, the other students from heroics, general studies, support, and business courses. He looked at the cameras broadcasting his image across the country. He felt no nervousness, only a cold sense of purpose. "I'll keep this brief," he began, his voice calm and clear, amplified throughout the stadium. "All of you are here to compete, to prove your worth, to chase a dream. That's fine. But understand this, you are all just whetstones for me to sharpen my skills. You are obstacles. Some of you might be slightly more challenging than others, but in the end, you will all fall. I will be number one. It's not a goal, it's an inevitability. So do your best to make this interesting for me." He turned and walked away from the microphone, leaving behind a stunned, silent stadium. The initial shock quickly turned into a wave of outrage and booing from the other classes. Class 1A just looked down, embarrassed and intimidated. Bakugo was shaking with fury. Todoroki watched him with a cold, calculating gaze. Izuku had just declared war on everyone. The first event was the obstacle race. Izuku didn't bother with any flashy tricks. As Todoroki froze the ground at the start, trapping many students, Izuku simply reinforced the soles of his shoes with cursed energy, allowing him to run across the ice as if it were solid ground. At the giant robot inferno from the entrance exam, while others tried to fight or evade them, Izuku simply ran straight forward. With a series of precise, invisible dismantle slashes, he carved a perfect path through the robot's legs, causing them to topple harmlessly behind him as he passed. At the canyon, the fall, He simply jumped, using cursed energy to cushion his landing at the bottom and then leaping to the other side in a single bound. He reached the minefield far ahead of anyone else. He could sense the location of every single mine. With the grace of a dancer, he navigated the field at full speed, never once setting off a single explosive. He crossed the finish line in first place, not even breathing heavily. He turned and watched as Todoroki and Kugo battled fiercely for second place, their expressions masks of grim determination. To him, their struggle was like watching children fight over a toy. The second event was the cavalry battle. As the first-place finisher, Izuku's point value was an absurd 10 million. He was the target for everyone. He expected to be alone, but a team formed around him, albeit reluctantly. He chose Fumikage Tokoyami for his versatile and powerful dark shadow. Mei Hatsume from the support course joined for the chance to show off her babies. And Ochako Uraraka, despite her fear, joined him out of a sense of loyalty and a belief in his strength. Izuku's strategy was simple. Hatsume, use your gadgets to keep us mobile. Uraraka, you'll be our emergency escape plan. Tokoyami, you are our primary defense and offense. I will be the command center. For the entire match, Izuku did nothing but direct. He used his enhanced senses and tactical mind to predict every team's move. Tokoyami, 3 meters to the left now. A team is approaching from your blind spot. Hatsume, jetpack, 45-degree angle now. We need altitude. He never attacked once. He simply outthought everyone. His team moved like a perfectly oiled machine, evading every attempt to steal their headband. In the final moments, Todoroki's team made a final, desperate charge. At Izuku's command, Tokoyami's dark shadow lashed out, not to attack, but to create a massive smokescreen, allowing them to slip away and run out the clock. They finished in first place without ever engaging in a real fight. The final event was the one-on-one tournament. His path to the finals was a demonstration in controlled brutality. His first opponent, a general studies student with a tail, was defeated in seconds, knocked out of the ring by a flick of cursed energy. His match against Hitoshi Shinso was more interesting. Shinso's mind control quirk was potent. As the match began, Shinso taunted him. "You think you're so much better than everyone, huh? With a blessed power like that." Izuku made the mistake of replying, "I wasn't blessed, I earned this." And just like that, his mind went blank. He was trapped, his body frozen under Shinso's control. "Now, turn around and walk out of the ring like a good little puppet," Shinso commanded. His body began to obey, but inside the fog of the mind control, that dark, immense power churned. It was an external force, an energy that was not tied to his brain or his nervous system. It was pure, raw power, and it rejected the foreign influence. With a massive surge of cursed energy that erupted from his body like a shockwave, he shattered the mind control. The backlash sent Shinso stumbling backward. Izuku blinked, his mind clear again. "Interesting quirk," he said. His voice cold. He appeared in front of Shinso in an instant and tapped him on the chest. The boy flew backward out of the ring, unconscious before he hit the ground. His next match was against Shoto Todoroki. The son of the number 2 hero, Endeavor, was a prodigy in his own right, but he was holding back, refusing to use the fire half of his quirk, the side he inherited from his father. The fight began, and Todoroki unleashed a massive wave of ice, the same move that had won him his previous matches instantly. Izuku didn't even move. He simply held up a hand, and a wave of pure cursed energy, visible as a black distortion in the air, met the ice. The glacier shattered into a million pieces before it could reach him. "Is that it?" Izuku asked, his voice laced with disappointment. "You're the son of the number 2 hero, and this is all you have? You're pathetic." He began to pressure Todoroki relentlessly. He didn't use his cutting techniques. He just used raw speed and strength, appearing and disappearing, landing light but stinging blows that Todoroki could barely track. He was forcing him back, giving him no room to mount another large-scale ice attack. "You're fighting with half your power," Izuku said, ducking under a swipe of ice and landing a solid punch to Todoroki's gut. "Because of some childish grudge against your father, you dishonor your opponent by not using your full strength. You dishonor yourself. If you won't take this seriously, then get out of my ring." He was goading him, pushing his buttons, just as he had with Bakugo. But this time it wasn't just to win. He saw the conflict in Todoroki's eyes, the self-hatred. He saw a powerful tool being left to rust. "It's your power, isn't it?" Izuku yelled, his voice echoing through the stadium. "Not his." Those words, so similar to what his mother had once told him, broke through Todoroki's defenses. With a roar of rage and release, his left side erupted in a colossal pillar of flame. The heat washed over the stadium. Izuku smiled. "There it is. Now, show me what you can really do." The battle that followed was spectacular. A maelstrom of fire and ice clashed against Izuku's dark, oppressive energy. But Todoroki was still new to using his fire. His control was clumsy. Izuku, the master of his own power, exploited every opening. In the end, he caught Todoroki in a moment of hesitation between fire and ice and landed a single decisive chop to the back of his neck. Todoroki collapsed unconscious. The final match was against Bakugo. It was the showdown everyone had been waiting for. Bakugo was a force of nature, moving with a new precision, his explosions more focused, more powerful than ever. He had learned from his defeat in the battle trial. But it didn't matter. Izuku showed him the true meaning of overwhelming power. He didn't toy with him this time. He met every explosion with a countermeasure. When Bakugo flew at him, Izuku was faster. When Bakugo unleashed his howitzer impact, a massive swirling explosion, Izuku simply stood his ground and held up one hand. Dismantle. The entire explosion was shredded, dissipating into harmless light and heat before it could reach him. He showed Bakugo mercy, but no respect. He systematically broke him down, countering every move, proving at every turn that nothing Bakugo could do would ever be enough. Finally, he caught Bakugo by the arm, spun him around, and slammed him into the concrete stage. Bakugo was out cold. Izuku Midoriya was the winner of the UA Sports Festival. All Might presented him with the first place medal. As he placed it around his neck, he leaned in and whispered, "That was a terrifying display, young Midoriya. You must learn that true strength lies in compassion, not just power." Izuku looked at the medal, then up at the symbol of peace. "Compassion doesn't stop a villain from killing a family," he said, his voice cold and clear. "Power does. You've grown soft and naive in your old age." He walked to the podium for his victory speech. He looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the entire nation of Japan. "Let this be a lesson," he said, his voice booming. "There are those with strength, and there are those who are weak. I am strong. I will protect the innocent by any means necessary. I will eliminate any threat. I am not the hero you want, smiling for the cameras. I am the hero you need, the one who will do what others are too weak to do. The age of smiling heroes is over. The age of results has begun." The stadium was silent. The public didn't know whether to cheer or be terrified. Pro heroes across the country watched, a deep schism forming. Many were appalled by his brutal philosophy, but many others, the ones who fought on the front lines day after day, saw the grim truth in his words. The offers for internships flooded in, a mix of top 10 heroes who wanted to harness his power and underground heroes who appreciated his ruthless pragmatism. Izuku Midoriya had not just won a tournament, he had shattered the very definition of what it meant to be a hero. For his hero internship, Izuku sorted through the dozens of offers. He dismissed the top 10 heroes like Best Jeanist and Endeavor. They were too public, too constrained by rules and image. He needed someone who understood the grim reality of hero work, someone who wouldn't flinch at his methods. He chose Gunhead, a hero known for his close-quarters combat skills and no-nonsense attitude. It was an unexpected choice, but a tactical one. Gunhead's agency operated in a rougher part of the city, where the line between hero and vigilante often blurred. It was during his internship that chaos erupted in Hosu City. The hero killer, Stain, had been cutting a bloody swath through the city, targeting heroes he deemed unworthy. Simultaneously, a trio of Nomu, similar to the one from the USJ but weaker, were unleashed upon the city center by the League of Villains, creating widespread panic and destruction. Izuku was nearby when the alerts went out. Gunhead gave him a simple order: "Go, help with civilian evacuation, avoid the Nomu." Izuku nodded and disappeared, but he wasn't heading for the evacuation zones. His enhanced senses picked up the telltale signs of a high-level fight in a secluded alleyway. He heard the clash of steel, the grunt of pain. He arrived to a grim scene. The pro-hero native was down, bleeding. Tenya Ida was on the ground, his arm pierced by a blade, and standing over them was a man wrapped in bandages and a tattered red scarf, his body bristling with blades. The hero killer, Stain. Another fake, Stain hissed, raising his katana to finish Ida. You only seek vengeance. You are not a true hero. Before the blade could fall, an invisible force sliced through the air, forcing Stain to leap backward. His katana now had a deep, clean nick in the blade. Who's there? Stain snarled, his serpentine tongue flicking out. Izuku stepped out of the shadows, his expression calm. You're the hero killer, Stain. Your ideology is interesting. Stain's eyes widened as he took in the boy. He recognized him from the sports festival. The boy who spoke of results, not smiles. You, the child who understands true strength. What are you doing here? To claim my bounty? No, Izuku said, ignoring the bleeding Ida for the moment. I'm here to understand you. You believe that most heroes are fakes, motivated by fame and money. You believe that only All Might is a true hero. You're not entirely wrong about the first part, but you're wrong about the second. Ida struggled to his feet. Midoriya, get out of here! This is my fight. Izuku glanced at him. You've already lost. Stay down before you get yourself killed. He turned his attention back to Stain. All Might is a symbol, a powerful one, but a flawed one. His refusal to kill, his belief in the inherent goodness of even the most depraved villains, is a weakness. It's why criminals escape, reoffend, and destroy more lives. His brand of heroism is inefficient. Stain's head tilted, a flicker of genuine interest in his crazed eyes. You speak with a conviction I have not seen in anyone but him. You believe heroes should kill? I believe heroes should eliminate threats. Permanently, Izuku stated. A villain who is dead cannot harm anyone else. It is the most logical and effective way to save the maximum number of people. That is the definition of heroism. A slow, twisted smile spread across Stain's face. I see it in your eyes. You have killed. You have taken that burden upon yourself for the sake of others. Your spirit, it is not that of a fake. It is the spirit of a true hero. The philosophical debate was over. The fight began. It was a battle of ideologies made manifest. Stain was a whirlwind of blades, his movements erratic and deadly, his goal to ingest his opponent's blood to activate his quirk. Izuku was a phantom of efficiency, his movements minimal and precise. He didn't need to dodge wildly. He simply shifted his body just enough for Stain's blades to miss. Stain was fast, one of the fastest opponents Izuku had ever faced. He managed to nick Izuku's arm with a thrown knife. He licked the blood from the blade, his eyes wide with triumph. It's over. Now you are paralyzed. Izuku didn't stop moving. He continued his advance, his arm already healing from the cut. I told you, he said, his voice dangerously low. My power is not a quirk. Your little trick doesn't work on me. Stain's shock was his undoing. In that moment of hesitation, Izuku acted. He didn't use dismantle to kill him. That would be too easy and he needed information. He used a precise cleave to sever the tendons in Stain's shoulders and knees. The hero killer collapsed in a heap, his limbs useless, his weapons clattering to the ground. It was at that moment that Todoroki arrived, drawn by the commotion. He found a scene of quiet devastation. Ida and Native bleeding on the ground, and Izuku standing over the defeated, immobilized form of the hero killer. Midoriya, Todoroki started, unsure what to say. He's alive, Izuku said, anticipating the question. He's more useful that way. He knelt down beside Stain. Tell me about the League of Villains, about the man with the hands. Stain just laughed, a gurgling, bloody sound. You may be a true hero, boy, but I will never betray my own convictions. Suddenly, a winged Nomu swooped down, grabbing Izuku and lifting him into the air. But before it could fly away, Stain, with a final, impossible surge of willpower, freed himself from his paralysis, licked the blood of the Nomu from the ground where it had been injured, and froze it in place. He then stabbed the creature through the brain, killing it instantly. He stood there, ribs broken, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and delivered his final, chilling speech to the assembled heroes and police who had just arrived. You fakes. I will purge you all. The only one who is allowed to kill me is a true hero. All Might. His sheer willpower and conviction released a wave of killing intent so powerful that everyone, even Endeavor, was frozen in fear. Everyone except Izuku, who had landed gracefully on the ground. He watched Stain with a detached curiosity. This man's will was impressive, a waste, but impressive. As Stain finally succumbed to his injuries and passed out, Izuku looked at the assembled heroes. They were staring at him, not Stain. They had seen his fight, his coldness, his terrifying power. The aftermath was a political nightmare for the Hero Public Safety Commission. 3 students had engaged and defeated the hero killer, a feat most pros could not accomplish. But one of those students, Izuku Midoriya, had used lethal force and displayed an ideology that was fundamentally at odds with hero law. The official story was a cover-up. Endeavor was credited with defeating Stain, while the students were said to have been minor participants. Ida and Todoroki were frustrated by the lie. Izuku didn't care. Public credit was irrelevant. He had tested himself against a formidable opponent, confirmed the limits of his own philosophy, and gained valuable intelligence. The hero killer had respected him. In a world of fakes, that was a validation more meaningful than any medal. And as he left Hosu, Stain's final warning echoed in his mind, a warning about the corruption of hero society, a warning that resonated with the cold, pragmatic core of his being. The final exams were a stark reminder of the teacher's growing apprehension towards Izuku. The practical portion pitted teams of 2 students against 1 teacher. The pairings were strategic, designed to challenge the students' weaknesses. Izuku was paired with the one person who hated him most, Katsuki Bakugo, and their opponent was the one man who was most concerned about Izuku's path, All Might. The objective was either to capture the teacher or for one student to escape through a designated gate. The moment the pairing was announced, Bakugo's face contorted with rage. "I'm not working with him," Izuku just sighed. "This isn't about what you want, Katsuki. It's about passing the exam. Our opponent is All Might. Your explosions against his power are like firecrackers against a hurricane. Head-on conflict is suicide. Therefore, the only logical objective is escape." "I'm not running away," Bakugo snarled. Izuku's eyes narrowed, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Then you are an obstacle, and you know what I do with obstacles. You will follow my plan, or I will incapacitate you and drag your unconscious body through the exit gate. The choice is yours." The sheer coldness of the threat, the absolute certainty with which he said it, finally broke through Bakugo's stubborn pride. He gritted his teeth and looked away. "Fine. What's the plan, you damn nerd?" Izuku laid it out with chilling precision. Bakugo would act as a distraction, a loud, flashy diversion to draw All Might's attention. His job was to create chaos, to force All Might to focus on mitigating the collateral damage from his explosions. Meanwhile, Izuku would use the chaos to navigate the city unseen and make a break for the escape gate. The exam began. All Might, wearing weighted bracers to handicap himself, met them with a grim expression. "I am a villain," he boomed, though his heart wasn't in it. He was here to teach these boys a lesson about teamwork and heroism. Bakugo, following the plan, immediately launched an attack. "Stun grenade!" he yelled, unleashing a blinding flash of light. He then followed up with a series of powerful targeted explosions, not at All Might, but at the surrounding buildings, forcing the hero to move to brace them to prevent their collapse. It was a perfect distraction. While All Might was occupied, Izuku moved through the shadows, a ghost in the simulated city. He flowed over rooftops and through alleys, his presence completely suppressed. He was 100 meters from the gate, then 50, then 10. It was almost too easy. But All Might was not the #1 hero for nothing. He had anticipated this. With a mighty roar, he unleashed a Texas smash, not at Bakugo, but at the street in front of Izuku. The wind pressure was like a physical wall, sending Izuku tumbling backward and revealing his position. "I knew you would not face me head-on, young Midoriya," All Might said, appearing between Izuku and the gate. "Your path is one of efficiency, but it lacks heart. A true hero never runs from a fight when people are in need." Bakugo arrived, his gauntlets smoking. "We're not running, we're fighting together." He launched himself at All Might, a genuine powerful attack. Izuku saw his opening. While All Might was forced to block Bakugo's attack, the path to the gate was clear. But he didn't take it. All Might's words, combined with a flicker of the old Izuku's admiration for the man, made him hesitate. He wanted to prove him wrong. He wanted to show him that his way was not heartless, but simply more effective. "Katsuki, now!" Izuku yelled. He fired a compressed blast of cursed energy at the ground beneath All Might's feet, creating a smokescreen. Bakugo, understanding instantly, used his explosions to propel himself backward, grabbing Izuku on the way. The two of them, in a rare moment of perfect, unspoken coordination, used the momentum to fly over All Might's head and toward the gate. All Might turned, ready to intercept, but it was too late. Izuku's foot crossed the line. They had passed. In the post-exam evaluation, All Might looked at the two of them, a complex expression on his face. You passed. Your coordination in the final moments was impressive. But young Midoriya, your strategy was cold, calculating. You treated your partner as a tool, a means to an end. That is not the way of a hero. Izuku met his gaze. My strategy resulted in 0 casualties and a successful completion of the objective with minimal energy expenditure. It was the optimal outcome. Your way involves dramatic speeches and unnecessary property damage. Tell me, which is more heroic? All Might had no answer. He could only look at the boy he once considered a potential successor and see a chasm between their ideologies that was as wide and deep as the ocean. Izuku's leadership was undeniable, his power immense, his results unquestionable. But his heart, All Might feared, was a cold, dark place. The forest training camp was supposed to be a chance for Class 1A to push their quirks to their limits. For Izuku, it was a chance to refine his techniques. While his classmates engaged in grueling physical exercises, Izuku sat in quiet meditation, focusing on the output and efficiency of his cursed energy. He practiced forming smaller, more precise domain expansions, trying to shrink the radius to conserve energy. He worked on his reverse curse technique, trying to heal minor cuts without conscious thought. His classmates gave him a wide berth. His actions at the USJ and the sports festival had cemented his reputation. He was their classmate, their powerful ace in the hole, but he was not their friend. He was an entity to be respected and feared. He was, in a word, alone, and he was fine with that. The idyllic training was shattered on the third night. The forest was engulfed in poisonous gas and blue flames. The League of Villains Vanguard Action Squad had arrived. Their goal was twofold: to create chaos and to capture Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku was with a group of students when the attack began. His first priority, as always, was the protection of the innocent. He saw the villain, Muscular, a hulking man whose body was covered in writhing muscle fibers, bearing down on the small horned child, Koda. The old Izuku's spirit, the one who wanted to save everyone, surged to the forefront. He appeared between Muscular and Koda in a flash. Well, well, Muscular grinned, his face a mask of sadistic glee. If it isn't the sports festival champion, I'm gonna enjoy breaking you. Muscular's power was immense, his strength rivaling the USJ Nomu. He augmented his body with his muscle fiber quirk, making him a living juggernaut. He threw a punch that could shatter bedrock. But Izuku was faster. He didn't try to block. He simply weaved around the blow, his movements fluid and precise. Your power is impressive, Izuku said, his voice calm. But you're slow. All that muscle just gets in the way. He didn't use his domain. He didn't need to. This was a simple matter of superior technique. He used a combination of dismantle and cleave, not to kill, but to disable. He severed the muscle fibers on Muscular's arms, rendering them useless. He sliced the tendons in his legs, bringing the giant crashing to the ground. The entire fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Muscular lay on the ground, a whimpering, powerless heap. Izuku turned to Koda, who was staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. Stay here. It's safe now. He then disappeared back into the forest, a green phantom moving to intercept the next threat. He moved through the chaos with deadly efficiency. He took down the gas-wielding villain, Mustard, with a single, non-lethal strike. He countered Dabi's blue flames with a barrier of cursed energy. He was a one-man army, a force of nature, turning the tide of the battle. But he couldn't be everywhere at once. While he was saving his classmates on one side of the forest, with the Lily Forest, the villain Mr. Half Compressed succeeded in his mission on the other. He captured Bakugo, compressing him into a small blue marble. Izuku sensed it the moment it happened, a spike of familiar energy, then its sudden disappearance. He arrived at the scene just in time to see Mr. Compressed, Dabi, and the other villains preparing to retreat through Kurogiri's warp gate. Give him back, Izuku demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. The temperature of the forest seemed to plummet. The ground around his feet began to crackle with black energy. Dabi just smirked. Sorry, champ. He's with us now. The boss has plans for him. Izuku's rage, a cold, focused thing, began to build. For the first time, he had failed. Despite all his power, all his efficiency, he had failed to protect someone he was responsible for. The feeling was unacceptable. He prepared to unleash his domain to obliterate them all. But he hesitated. Uraraka and Todoroki were nearby. If he used it, he might kill them too. His power was too great, too indiscriminate for this delicate situation. That single moment of hesitation cost him. The villains stepped through the portal, and it vanished, taking Bakugo with them. Izuku stood there, his fists clenched, his body trembling with a silent, consuming rage. He looked at his hands, the source of his incredible power, and for the first time since he was 4 years old, he felt powerless. His strength had been absolute, but it had not been enough. His failure was a bitter pill, a flaw in his perfect, logical world, and it was a flaw he would rectify, no matter the cost. The decision was not a difficult one. While the pro-heroes planned their official by-the-book raid on the League of Villains hideout, Izuku made his own plans. He, along with Todoroki, Kirishima, Yaoyorozu, and Ida, mounted their own covert rescue mission. It was illogical, reckless, and against orders. It was also the only option. They tracked the villains to an abandoned bar in the Kamino ward of Yokohama. While the pro-heroes launched their simultaneous assault on the Nomu factory, Izuku and his team prepared to infiltrate the bar. But before they could act, the situation escalated. The wall of the hideout exploded inward, and All Might stood there, his face a mask of pure fury. The raid had begun, and then he appeared. A man in a dark, immaculate suit with a face that was nothing but scar tissue. No eyes, no nose, just a mouth. Tubes snaked from his neck into a complex life support system. The air grew thick and heavy, charged with an ancient, suffocating pressure that dwarfed even Izuku's own. This was All for One, the true mastermind, the symbol of evil. The moment their presences met, All for One's head snapped towards Izuku's hiding place. He ignored All Might completely. A slow, terrible smile spread across his scarred face. "Ah," the voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly monstrous. "There you are. I have been waiting for you for a very, very long time." Izuku froze. The other students felt the pressure, but Izuku felt something more. A resonance, a horrifying sense of familiarity, as if the dark energy within him was recognizing its source. All for One took a step forward, his attention solely on the boy. "Do you know, I was beginning to think my dear doctor had failed me, that his magnum opus was a dud. But look at you. Perfect. Even better than I could have imagined." A flashback, sharp and unwelcome, seared through Izuku's mind. The doctor's office. The smiling, portly man with the glasses, Dr. Garaki. The subject is responding faster than anticipated. "The doctor?" Izuku's voice was a choked whisper. "Oh yes," All for One chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "Dr. Garaki is a true artist. He spent years perfecting the process. We needed the right candidate, you see. Someone with a strong will, a heroic heart, but a body that was a blank slate. Quirkless. Someone who could handle the infusion. Someone who could house the power of a king without shattering." The truth slammed into Izuku with the force of a physical blow, his power, his life, his entire identity. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a rare medical phenomenon. It was an experiment, a plan. Why? Izuku managed to ask, his mind reeling, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. All for One's smile widened. "Why? Because my old body is failing me. I have grown weak. I need a new vessel, one strong enough to hold not only my quirks, but a power far greater. The power of the King of Curses, Ryomen Sukuna." He gestured to Izuku. "That power was just the primer, my boy. A way to strengthen the vessel, to prepare it for my consciousness. You were never meant to be a hero. You were grown, cultivated to be me." The horror of the revelation was absolute. He was a tool, a puppet, a container grown to house the very evil All Might had fought his entire life. His desire to be a hero, his ruthless methods, his entire existence. It was all a lie, orchestrated by the monster standing before him. The psychological strain was immense, a pressure far greater than any physical blow. The foundations of his being cracked, and in that crack, something ancient and terrible began to stir. The dark energy within him, the power he had commanded and controlled for 11 years, suddenly surged with a will of its own. It was no longer just a well of power for him to draw from. It was a consciousness, a presence. A vessel? A new voice, ancient and malevolent, echoed not in his ears but in the very center of his soul. It was a voice of pure, arrogant malice. Black markings, intricate and terrifying, began to spread across Izuku's skin, flowing over his face, his arms, his hands. His green eyes, once cold and analytical, now burned with a crimson light. The sclera turned black. And then, the most horrifying change of all. Below his normal eyes, two more eyelids tore themselves open, revealing a second pair of blood-red eyes that glared with an intelligence and cruelty that was utterly inhuman. His body contorted, and with the sickening sound of tearing fabric and snapping bone, a second pair of arms burst from his sides, fully formed and ready for battle. All for One watched, his smile faltering for the first time, replaced by a look of shock and dawning horror. This wasn't part of the plan. The vessel wasn't just being prepared. It was being claimed. The being that was once Izuku Midoriya stood up to its full height, four arms flexing, four eyes scanning the room with regal contempt. It looked at All for One, at all might, at the terrified students. A low, rumbling chuckle escaped its lips, a sound that promised an age of slaughter and despair. The ancient, amused voice echoed in the ruins of Izuku's mind, a king returning to his throne. "You wanted a vessel, human? You should have chosen more carefully. This body is mine now." The world fractured. For All for One, the architect of ages, it was a moment of supreme triumph turned to absolute horror. The vessel, his perfect creation, was not merely activating, it was being usurped. The crimson eyes that now stared at him were not those of a frightened boy or a nascent god. They were ancient, arrogant, and utterly dismissive. The power radiating from the four-armed figure was not the controlled, primed energy he had intended. It was a chaotic, malevolent flood, a king returning to a kingdom he never knew he had. For All Might, time seemed to slow to a crawl. The boy he had worried over, the child with the terrifying but heroic heart, had vanished. In his place stood a demon from myth, wreathed in black markings and radiating an evil that felt older and purer than even All for One's. He was caught between his nemesis and a new, incomprehensible catastrophe. For Izuku Midoriya, it was the ultimate nightmare. He was no longer in the driver's seat. He was a prisoner in a dark, silent theater, forced to watch through his own eyes as a monster wore his skin. He could feel the creature's thoughts not as his own, but as a venomous whisper coiling around his consciousness. Insignificant, the voice, Sukuna's voice, echoed in the abyss of Izuku's mind. It was directed at All for One. You play with power like a child plays with mud pies. You collect, you hoard, but you do not understand its essence: to rule. The being that was once Izuku, now Sukuna, flexed its four hands. It ignored All Might entirely, its gaze fixed on the symbol of evil. "You wanted this body?" Sukuna asked, his voice a layered harmony of his own ancient tones and Izuku's youthful tenor. "Come and claim it." All for One, for the first time in a century, felt a sliver of genuine fear. He had planned for every contingency except this one. He activated a dozen quirks at once: air cannon, rivets, strength enhancers. "You are a flaw in the plan, an anomaly to be erased," he roared, unleashing a devastating blast of pressurized air. Sukuna simply smiled, a cruel, sharp-toothed grin that was terrifying on Izuku's face. He raised one of his lower arms, palm open. The blast hit an invisible wall and dissipated into nothing. With his upper right hand, he made a casual slicing motion. Dismantle. The attack wasn't aimed at All for One. It sliced through the entire back wall of the bar, the building behind it, and the one behind that, creating a perfectly clean, kilometer-long trench through the Camino ward. It was a display of casual, city-altering power that made All for One's attack look like a child's tantrum. "This body has potential," Sukuna mused, looking at his hands, "but the previous owner is noisy." He turned his four crimson eyes toward All Might. "And you reek of a different kind of power. Annoying." Before anyone could react, Sukuna crouched and launched himself backward, shattering the ground. He crashed through the hole he'd just created and disappeared into the night, his laughter echoing through the ruined city. His departure was as sudden and chaotic as his arrival. The immediate threat was gone, but the two remaining titans, All Might and All for One, were left in a stunned silence. The script had been torn to shreds. All for One, his grand plan for immortality now a smoking ruin, turned his full, desperate fury on All Might. The legendary battle commenced, but for All Might, a new, more terrifying question loomed. How do you save a boy who has become a vessel for the King of Curses? Miles away, Izuku's body stumbled into an alley, collapsing against a wall. The black markings receded. The second pair of eyes and arms dissolved back into his flesh, a process that was agonizingly painful. Izuku gasped, control flooding back into his limbs. He was himself again, but he was not alone. Pathetic. Sukuna's voice sneered, now a permanent resident in his head. You can't even handle a little reconfiguration. This body is weaker than I thought. Get out of my head, Izuku grunted, clutching his skull. This is my head now, brat. My body. You are merely a tenant, and the rent is due. For now, I will rest. This era is interesting. I need to observe. The voice faded, not gone, but dormant, a sleeping tiger in the cage of his ribs. Izuku was left shaking in the alley, the full weight of the revelation crashing down on him. His power, his identity, his entire life since he was 4, was a lie. He was a weapon forged for a monster, only to be claimed by another. The fight for his life was no longer against villains on the outside. The final war had already begun, and the battlefield was his own soul. The Provisional Hero License exam was a chaotic affair. Taking place in a massive indoor arena, it was designed to test aspiring heroes in a high-pressure, simulated disaster scenario. For Izuku, the disaster had started long before the exam. Sukuna was a constant, mocking presence in his mind, a backseat driver with a penchant for genocide. Look at them. Sukuna's voice purred as they stood among hundreds of students from other schools. Scuttling insects. We could crush them all in an instant. A small domain expansion, it would be a good stretch. Shut up, Izuku thought, his hands clenched into fists. He had to focus. He had to prove that he was in control, that he was a hero. The first phase of the exam began, a free-for-all where students had to tag each other with soft balls. It was a test of combat prowess, situational awareness, and quirk usage. For Izuku, it was a tightrope walk over a volcano. He moved with his usual fluid efficiency, dodging attacks, his analytical mind processing the battlefield. But Sukuna's influence was a constant temptation. Hey, it's the UA kid who gave that arrogant speech, a student from Ketsubutsu Academy yelled, throwing a volley of wind sickles at him. Izuku dodged easily. His first instinct was to incapacitate the student with a quick, non-lethal strike, but Sukuna's whisper was seductive. He challenged a king. The proper response is not to dodge. It is to annihilate, a flick of your wrist, dismantle his arms. He'll never throw a punch again. No, Izuku grunted aloud, earning him strange looks. He settled for a compromise, a move that was both his and not. He used a small, focused blast of cursed energy to shatter the ground at the student's feet, knocking him off balance and allowing Izuku to tag him out. It was effective, but it was also excessively destructive. The pro-hero examiners watching from the sidelines made a note. Midoriya Izuku, powerful, but with a tendency for overwhelming force. The struggle continued throughout the first phase. Every opponent he faced was a battle on 2 fronts. He had to defeat them while simultaneously wrestling Sukuna's murderous impulses. He passed, but not cleanly. He was too brutal, too efficient, his methods lacking the care and restraint expected of a hero. The second phase was a rescue operation. Actors played the part of injured civilians trapped in a disaster zone. This, Izuku thought, was where he could shine. This was his core desire. He found a family, trapped under heavy rubble. As he began to lift the concrete, the father actor started yelling. My leg, I think it's broken. You have to be careful. He is slowing you down, Sukuna stated calmly. The most efficient way to rescue them is to remove the damaged part. Cleave his leg off. He will be easier to carry. That's insane, Izuku shot back in his mind, his focus slipping. He accidentally put too much force into lifting the rubble, causing it to scrape against the actor's leg. The man cried out in mock pain. You're not being careful at all, the actor yelled, staying in character. Izuku's frustration mounted. He was trying to save people, but the monster in his head was making it impossible. He saw Gang Orca, playing the part of a villain, attacking the evacuation point. He needed to get these people to safety and then join the fight. The solution is simple, Sukuna offered. Kill the actor. He is an obstacle to saving the others. He's not an obstacle. He's a person I need to save. Is he? Or is he a distraction preventing you from stopping the larger threat? Your sentimentality is a weakness, brat. True saviors make hard choices. The argument, twisted as it was, struck a nerve. It was a dark reflection of his own past philosophy. He managed to rescue the family, but his movements were rough, his bedside manner non-existent. He was so consumed by his internal war that he failed to properly comfort the victims, a key component of the test. When the results were posted, his name was not on the list of those who passed. He had failed. Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, even Bakugo had passed. But he, the most powerful student of them all, had failed. The reason given was simple: excessive force, lack of victim empathy, and a fundamental misunderstanding of heroic duty during rescue operations. As he stood there, staring at the results, Sukuna's laughter echoed in his mind, a triumphant mocking sound. "I told you, you are too weak to wield this power. You try to be a hero, but you don't have the stomach for what it takes. You try to be a monster, but you don't have the will. You are nothing, a failed vessel. But don't worry, I will teach you. I will burn away your weakness until only strength remains, until only I remain." Izuku didn't respond. He just stood there, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. He had to fight back. He had to prove Sukuna wrong, but he couldn't do it by suppressing the power. He had to face it. He had to conquer it. He had to descend into the darkness of his own soul and wage a war against the king who had taken up residence there. The mission to investigate the Shihasai Kai, a Yakuza group resurgent under its young leader, Kai Chisaki, known as Overhaul, came at the worst possible time. Izuku, now unlicensed and reeling from his internal turmoil, was brought in as an observer under the wing of Sir Night-Eye, All Might's former sidekick. Night-Eye's foresight quirk made him invaluable, but his cold demeanor and lingering disappointment in All Might's choice of a successor, or lack thereof, made him a difficult mentor. Izuku's first encounter with Chisaki was a chilling coincidence on the street. With him was a small, white-haired girl named Eri, her arms wrapped in bandages, her eyes devoid of hope. The moment Izuku saw her, the old, pure heroic instinct flared brighter than it had in months. He had to save her. But when he reached out, Chisaki's hand fell on his shoulder, and the man's killing intent was palpable. "This one is interesting," Sukuna mused from within Izuku's mind. "His power, it feels like a crude version of my own, to dismantle and reassemble. And the girl, her power is a torrent, a chaotic, beautiful thing. We should take it." "She's a child, not a prize," Izuku thought, his focus entirely on the trembling girl. He let Chisaki lead her away, a decision that would haunt him for days, but it was the correct tactical move. It confirmed their suspicions. Eri was the source of the quirk-destroying bullets the Hasaikai were developing. The plan to raid the Yakuza compound was set. A coalition of heroes, including Fat Gum, Ryukyu, and his classmates, Kirishima, Uraraka, and Asui, were assembled. For Izuku, the mission was a crucible. He had to save Eri, defeat a man whose philosophy was a dark mirror of his own past ideals, and battle Sukuna for every inch of control. The raid was chaos from the start. The compound was a labyrinth, its walls shifting and contorting under Chisaki's power. As they delved deeper, the internal battle intensified. "Let me take over," Sukuna offered as they were confronted by a powerful Hasaikai member. "I can clear a path to the girl in seconds. All these insects are wasting our time." "No, I'll do this my way," Izuku insisted, his fists crackling with black cursed energy that he struggled to keep in check. The true test came when he finally reached Chisaki and Eri. The Yakuza leader had fused with one of his subordinates, becoming a monstrous, multi-limbed behemoth. He was a god in his own domain, the walls and floor his weapons. "You heroes are a disease," Chisaki shrieked, spikes of stone erupting towards Izuku. "You preach ideals, but you can't make the hard choices. I will cure this world of its sickness." Izuku dodged, his mind racing. Chisaki's words were a poisoned echo of his own sports festival speech. He saw in the villain a reflection of the path he could have walked. The fight was brutal. Izuku was powerful, but Chisaki's ability to constantly reshape the battlefield and heal himself was overwhelming. He was being pushed back, injured, his stamina draining. "You are failing, brat," Sukuna hissed. "You are going to let him kill you, and the girl will suffer. Your weakness is a death sentence for her. Give me control. Just for a moment. I will save her. I will tear him apart so thoroughly that his own power won't be able to put him back together." The offer was tempting. The desire to save Eri was so strong it was a physical ache. Maybe just for a second. "No!" Izuku roared, both aloud and in his mind. He dodged another attack, but a stone spike grazed his side, opening a deep wound. The pain was immense. His control wavered, and Sukuna seized the opportunity. Izuku's vision blurred, the world tilting. He found himself standing on a desolate plain under a blood-red sky. Before him was a throne made of bleached skulls and bones, and sitting on it was a four-armed, four-eyed demon that looked exactly like his transformation in Kamino. It was Sukuna. "Welcome to your soul, Izuku Midoriya," Sukuna said with a lazy grin. "Or should I say, my domain." "Give me back control," Izuku demanded, his spectral form flickering. "Why? So you can fail again?" Sukuna stood, descending from his throne. "I am going to show you what real power is." In the real world, Izuku's body went still. His eyes, which had been green, flashed crimson. Black markings began to spread across his face. But then, something unexpected happened. Eri, seeing Izuku fall and seeing the monster begin to emerge, reached out. Her fear was overcome by a desperate desire to help the person who had shown her kindness. Her horn glowed, and her quirk activated, a wild, uncontrolled torrent of rewind energy washing over Izuku. For Sukuna, it was like being plunged into acid. His connection to the vessel, his very existence, was being unwritten. "What is this? This cursed power?" he roared in the mindscape, his form flickering and dissolving. For Izuku, the feeling was one of pure, unadulterated freedom. The dark presence that had haunted him for a decade vanished. The constant whispers, the murderous impulses, the oppressive weight on his soul, it was all gone. For the first time, he could feel his own power, the cursed energy that was now a part of him, without Sukuna's taint. It was clean. It was his. He opened his eyes. They were green. He looked at Chisaki, and for the first time he saw not a reflection of himself, but a man to be saved from his own madness. He looked at Eri, and his heart swelled with a protective instinct so pure it was overwhelming. Fueled by Eri's endless rewind, which was healing his injuries as fast as he sustained them, he became a whirlwind of righteous fury. He moved with a speed and power he had never known, his body reinforced to an incredible degree. He didn't need dismantle or cleave. He used his own strength, his own will. He systematically dismantled Chisaki's monstrous form, his every blow precise, powerful, and aimed not to kill, but to defeat. He defeated Overhaul, saving Eri and ending the threat of the Hasaikai. But as he held the unconscious girl in his arms, her quirk finally subsiding, he felt it. A cold, familiar tendril of darkness snaking its way back into the void in his soul. Eri's power had pushed Sukuna out, but it hadn't destroyed him. And as the rewind effect faded, the vacuum it left was an open door. Sukuna forced his way back in, re-establishing his parasitic bond with a vengeance. That was unpleasant. Sukuna's voice rasped, weaker than before, but filled with a new, burning hatred. That girl, her power is a threat. But this experience has been educational. I see now that I cannot simply wait for you to give in. I will have to take this body. I will have to devour your soul from the inside out. The freedom had been fleeting. The war was not over. It had only just begun. But now, Izuku knew what he was fighting for. He had tasted what it was like to be truly himself, to be a hero on his own terms. And he would fight, kill, or die to get that feeling back permanently. The remedial course was a humbling experience. While his classmates who had passed the license exam were engaging in exciting hero work, Izuku, along with Bakugo, Todoroki, and Inase Yorashi, were tasked with winning the hearts of a group of cynical, unruly elementary school children. For Bakugo and the others, it was a challenge of patience. For Izuku, it was a trial by fire. The children, with their unfiltered perceptions, could sense the darkness clinging to him. They shied away from him, whispering that he was scary and had monster eyes. Every attempt he made to be gentle or kind was met with fear. "Why do you bother with these brats?" Sukuna scoffed in his mind. "Their fear is a sign of respect. That is all you need from them. A king does not plead for the affection of insects." "A hero needs their trust," Izuku countered, his jaw tight as he watched the lead troublemaker, a boy with a powerful quirk, openly defy him. The challenge was to connect with them, to show them the heart of a hero. It was a battle Izuku was losing. His every instinct, honed by years of intimidation and ruthless efficiency, was wrong for this situation. Sukuna's constant commentary was a poison, turning his frustration into a cold, simmering anger. The breakthrough came during a villain attack simulation. The kids, using their quirks, were meant to be the villains. Izuku, instead of overpowering them, which would have been easy, chose a different path. He remembered his brief moment of freedom, the pure desire to protect Eri. He channeled that feeling. He didn't fight the kids, he protected them from each other. He used his cursed energy not to create destructive blasts, but to form small, precise barriers, shielding them from their own uncontrolled attacks. He moved not to intimidate, but to save. the lead troublemaker in a show of power, nearly brought a section of the ceiling down on another child. Izuku appeared in a flash, not to punish the boy, but to catch the debris, shielding the smaller child with his own body. He looked at the troublemaker, not with anger, but with a calm, serious expression. "Power is easy," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Controlling it, using it to protect instead of break things, that's hard. That's what makes a hero." In that moment, the children didn't see a monster. They saw a protector. The lead boy, for the first time, looked ashamed. He saw the truth in Izuku's words. It was a small victory, but for Izuku, it felt monumental. He had won a battle not with his fists, but with his heart. He had suppressed Sukuna's influence and acted as his true self. He passed the remedial course. As he received his provisional hero license, he felt a flicker of hope. The path to mastering himself was long and arduous, but it was not impossible. The UA School Festival was a welcome, if strange, return to a semblance of normalcy. Class 1A, deciding they needed to bring some joy to the other students after all the villain attacks, decided to put on a musical performance. Izuku, to his own surprise, found himself swept up in the preparations. He was part of the dance team, his enhanced physical abilities making him a natural, even if his expression remained intensely focused. Dancing? Sukuna's voice was filled with utter disdain. "You possess the power to level mountains, and you are using it to wiggle. The shame is unbearable." "It's for my friends," Izuku replied, his focus on the complex choreography. "It's to make people smile." Smile? What a useless, fleeting expression. Fear is eternal. Respect is eternal. A smile is forgotten in a moment. This, Izuku realized, was Sukuna's greatest weakness. The king of curses, a being of pure malice and power, could not comprehend positive human emotion. He saw joy, friendship, and love as nothing more than weaknesses to be exploited. For Izuku, they were becoming his greatest weapons. Every moment of laughter with his friends, every cheer of encouragement was a blow against the darkness in his soul, a reinforcement of his own identity. His newfound peace was tested by the appearance of the villainous duo, Gentle Criminal and La Brava. Their goal was to infiltrate UA during the festival for internet fame. Izuku encountered Gentle in a construction site on the outskirts of the campus. The fight was a delicate dance. Gentle's quirk, elasticity, made him a tricky, unpredictable opponent. But the real challenge was internal. "He is an annoyance," Sukuna growled as Gentle bounced off a steel beam. "End him. A single dismantle. No one will even know. It will be our secret." "He's not a murderer," Izuku grunted, dodging a blast of air. "He's just a sad man looking for recognition." He had to defeat Gentle quickly and quietly, without causing a scene that would cancel the festival. He had to use his power with surgical precision, a level of control he had never needed before. He used Cleave not to cut Gentle, but to slice through the steel beams he made elastic, disrupting his movement. He used his speed not to attack, but to herd Gentle away from the school. It was a perfect balance of power and restraint. He defeated Gentle Criminal without seriously injuring him, preserving the festival and the smiles of his friends. As he handed the defeated villain over to the authorities, he felt a sense of profound accomplishment. He had faced temptation and chosen the harder, better path. He made it back just in time for the performance. As the lights hit the stage and the music started, he moved with his classmates, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time in a long time. He saw Eri in the crowd, her face lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. In that moment, the roaring of the demon in his soul was reduced to a whisper. This was a victory. This was what he was fighting for. The Pro Hero arc brought a new level of challenge. The Hero Billboard chart announcement saw Endeavor finally achieve his lifelong goal of becoming the #1 hero, a position he accepted with grim determination rather than joy. It was during this time that a new, terrifying threat emerged, a high-end Nomu, a creature with intelligence, speed, and power that far surpassed the one from the US. Jayhawks, the new #2 hero, lured Endeavor into a confrontation with the high-end, a secret test from the Hero Public Safety Commission. Izuku, who was patrolling nearby, sensed the immense power spike and arrived on the scene just as the battle began. The fight was apocalyptic. The high-end, named Hood, was a nightmare of regeneration and multiple quirks. It pushed Endeavor, the hero of flames, to his absolute limit. "Now this is a battle," Sukuna's voice roared with excitement in Izuku's mind, the first time he had sounded genuinely pleased in months. This is what power is for. Look at it. The regeneration, the raw strength. Let me out, brat! Let us feast! This isn't a feast. It's a rescue, Izuku countered, moving to evacuate civilians trapped by the collapsing buildings. But he couldn't stay on the sidelines. Endeavor was being overwhelmed. Izuku joined the fray, his black and red cursed energy a stark contrast to Endeavor's brilliant flames. They fought side by side, an unlikely duo of fire and shadow. The battle was brutal, and Izuku felt his control slipping. The sheer violence and life-or-death stakes were a fertile ground for Sukuna's influence. He landed a powerful blow on the high end, using cleave to slice off one of its arms. The beast roared in pain. More, Sukuna demanded. Don't stop. Rip it to shreds. Tear out its heart. Show them what a real monster looks like. Izuku's eyes flashed crimson. He raised his hand to deliver a final, fatal dismantle, an attack that would have obliterated the Nomu entirely. But then he saw Endeavor, his face scarred, his body broken, still fighting, still pushing himself for the sake of the people watching. He saw the look in the number one hero's eyes. Not bloodlust, but a desperate, burning desire to prove himself worthy of the title, to atone for his past. That look broke the spell. Izuku pulled back, his eyes returning to green. He had almost lost himself. Together, they defeated the High End. Endeavor dealt the final, incinerating blow, securing a hard-won, bloody victory. In the aftermath, as medics tended to their wounds, Endeavor looked at Izuku. "I saw it in your eyes, kid," the flame hero said, his voice a low rumble. The look of a man fighting something inside him. I know that look. I saw it in the mirror for years. Yeah, don't let it consume you. Don't make the same mistakes I did. It was a moment of unexpected connection. Endeavor, the man whose obsession with power had destroyed his family, was offering him guidance. It was a stark reminder of the cost of unchecked ambition, a lesson Izuku took to heart. He was not alone in his struggle, and the paths of others, both good and bad, could serve as his guide. The joint training arc pitted Class 1A against Class 1B in a series of team battles. It was a chance to measure their growth. For Izuku, it was another public test of his internal war. He was the leader of his team, paired with Uraraka, Mineta, and Ashido. From the start, Sukuna was offering tactical advice, his centuries of battle experience a potent asset. The one with the mushroom quirk is a nuisance. Target her first, a single invisible slash from a distance. She will never see it coming, he advised. We're not assassinating them, Izuku replied, directing his team with his own strategies. We're outthinking them. He led his team brilliantly, his tactical acumen now a blend of his own analytical mind and the instincts he had absorbed from Sukuna. But, as the battle intensified, a new complication arose. As he tried to capture an opponent, a surge of black energy erupted from his arm. Not his usual cursed energy, but something else. Tendrils of pure darkness, like whips, shot out uncontrollably, tearing up the battlefield. It was Black Whip, a quirk from a previous one-for-all user, manifesting for the first time. The sudden emergence of a new, unknown power on top of his struggle with Sukuna caused a catastrophic overload. Izuku lost control completely. What is this? Sukuna roared in his mind, as confused and enraged as Izuku was. Another power? This vessel is more complicated than I thought. It's unstable. Izuku's body was a battleground. Cursed energy, Black Whip, and the latent power of One for All were warring within him, threatening to tear him apart. It was Uraraka who saved him. She wrapped her arms around him, her gravity-nullifying quirk easing the physical strain, but it was her voice, her presence, that anchored him. Deku. It's okay. We're here. His classmates, his friends, surrounded him, not with fear, but with support. Their presence was a lighthouse in the storm of his soul. He focused on them, on their trust, and slowly, painstakingly, he brought the rampaging power back under his control. The match was a draw, but the implications were immense. Izuku realized two things. First, his power was more complex and dangerous than he ever imagined. Second, and more importantly, he didn't have to fight his battle alone. His friends were his strength, his anchor. Sukuna hated it. The King of Curses thrived on isolation and despair. The bonds of friendship were a weapon he could not comprehend and could not defeat. Working at the Endeavor Agency alongside Bakugo and Todoroki was an exercise in tension and growth. The three rivals, pushed together under the tutelage of the new #1 hero, learned to coordinate their disparate abilities. For Izuku, it was a period of intense focus, learning to control Black Whip while keeping Sukuna chained in the depths of his mind. But Sukuna was growing impatient. He was tired of being a passenger. He was a king, and kings were meant to rule. During a high-speed chase after a villain, Sukuna made his move. The villain caused a massive explosion, creating a moment of chaos. In that split second, Sukuna surged forward, attempting to seize full control. The world dissolved into the blood-red landscape of Izuku's mindscape. This time, it was not a surprise visit. It was a declaration of war. Sukuna stood before him, not on his throne, but on the battlefield, 4 arms crossed, 4 eyes burning with contempt. "The time for games is over, brat," Sukuna snarled. "You have proven unworthy of this power. I will take it now, and I will erase the pathetic stain of your existence from this vessel forever." The first true battle for his soul began. In the mindscape, they clashed. Sukuna was a master of cursed techniques, unleashing waves of dismantle and cleave that Izuku had to counter with his own, less practiced versions. It was a battle of wills made manifest. In the real world, Izuku's body froze mid-air. His eyes flickered between green and red. Black Whip and cursed energy lashed out erratically. Bakugo saw it. He had seen that look before, that flicker of something alien in Deku's eyes. He had always hated Deku for his weakness, then for his inexplicable strength. But now he saw something else. A fight. "Deku," he roared, not with anger, but with a desperate urgency. "Whatever it is, fight it! Don't you dare lose, you damn nerd!" The sound of Bakugo's voice, his rival, his oldest connection, pierced through the chaos of the mindscape. It was a lifeline. Izuku, who was being beaten back by Sukuna's relentless assault, found a new reserve of strength. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for his friends, for the future he wanted to build with them. He pushed Sukuna back, a surge of pure will. He couldn't win, not yet, but he could achieve a stalemate. He suppressed Sukuna, forcing him back into dormancy, but the effort was monumental. He regained control, gasping for air, his body trembling. He knew then that these temporary victories were not enough. A final confrontation was inevitable. Sukuna would not stop until one of them was destroyed. He had to become stronger, not just in power, but in spirit. He had to prepare for the final war, the one that would determine the fate of his soul. The breaking point came during the period of societal collapse following the First War with Shigaraki. All for One had escaped, villains ran rampant, and the public's faith in heroes was shattered. Believing his presence endangered his friends, Izuku made a decision. He left UA. He would hunt the villains alone, a solitary vigilante cloaked in shadows and grime. It was exactly what Sukuna wanted. Alone, exhausted, and racked with guilt, Izuku was at his most vulnerable. Sukuna, who had been gathering his strength, saw his chance. "Look at you," Sukuna's voice echoed, no longer just in his mind, but seemingly in the world around him. "You call this heroism? Skulking in the dark, feared by the very people you protect. You have become a monster to fight monsters. Why not embrace it? Give me control. I will end this chaos. I will slaughter every villain. I will bring order through fear. It is the only way." "No," Izuku whispered, his body aching, his spirit frayed. "There's another way." "There is not," Sukuna declared. "This is the ultimatum. Surrender your body to me, and I will create a perfect, orderly world. Resist, and I will unleash our full power, destroying everything you hold dear, starting with your precious friends. I will force you to watch as I burn it all to the ground." This was it, the final battle. The world around Izuku faded, and he was plunged once more into his mindscape. But this time it was different. It was no longer a desolate plain. It was a perfect replica of Sukuna's innate domain, the Malevolent Shrine, a testament to how much ground the curse had gained within him. Sukuna sat on his throne of skulls, radiating an aura of absolute victory. "This is my world now, Izuku Midoriya. Here, I am God." The battle began, but it was not a clash of fists. It was a war of philosophy, of memory, of spirit. Sukuna didn't attack him with cursed energy. He attacked him with his own past. The image of the quirkless doctor appeared, sneering. "You were always just an experiment." The ghosts of the villains he had killed at the USJ rose, their eyes accusing. The memory of his failure to save Bakugo at the training camp played on a loop. The faces of the frightened children from the remedial course surrounded him, whispering, "Monster." Every failure, every doubt, every moment of darkness was a weapon turned against him. He was drowning in his own guilt. You see? Sukuna said, his voice a triumphant boom. Your heart is not heroic. It is a vessel of failure and regret. You are nothing without my strength, and my strength demands a worthy wielder. Izuku was on his knees, his spirit shattering. Sukuna was right. He had failed. He had hurt people. He was a monster. But then a new image appeared. It was not one of Sukuna's illusions. It was a memory he summoned himself. The memory of Uraraka holding him during the joint training. The memory of Bakugo's desperate yell. The memory of Todoroki and Ida fighting by his side. The memory of All Might entrusting him with his power. The memory of his mother's tears of pride. The memory of Eri's first smile. These were not weaknesses. They were his strength. He stood up, his spectral form solidifying. You're wrong, Izuku said, his voice clear and strong. My failures are a part of me, my guilt is a part of me, but so are they. He looked Sukuna in his 4 hate-filled eyes. You think strength is about being alone, about dominating everyone else, but you're the one who's weak. You're terrified of connection. You're terrified of love, because those are things you can never control. He didn't try to fight Sukuna's power with more power. He accepted it. He opened his arms, not in surrender, but in embrace. This power, your power, it is a part of me now. I will not reject it. I will not fear it. I will accept all of it. The darkness, the light, the rage, the love, all of it is me. He walked towards the throne. Sukuna, for the first time, looked uncertain. He blasted Izuku with pure malevolence, but it passed through him. Izuku was no longer fighting it. He was absorbing it. He reached the throne and placed a hand on Sukuna's shoulder. What are you doing? The curse roared, a hint of panic in his voice. I'm not a vessel, Izuku said calmly. I am Izuku Midoriya, and you are a part of me now, my power, my knowledge, but not my will. A brilliant, gentle green light erupted from Izuku's form, enveloping the malevolent shrine. It was not a light of destruction, but of acceptance. The throne of skulls crumbled into dust. The blood-red sky turned a peaceful blue. Sukuna screamed as his consciousness, his identity, his very being was not destroyed, but integrated, subsumed into a will far stronger than his own. His strength came from domination. Izuku's came from connection. And in the end, connection was the more powerful force. When Izuku opened his eyes, he was back in the rain-soaked alley. He felt whole. The mocking voice was gone. The murderous rage was gone. But the power, the knowledge, the centuries of battle experience, it was all still there, quiet, obedient, and entirely his. He could feel every technique, every application, not as an instinct, but as a conscious choice. He had won. He looked up to see headlights. A car screeched to a halt. His friends, Class 1A, led by Bakugo, had found him. They piled out, their faces etched with worry. Deku, Uraraka whispered. He looked at them, and for the first time they didn't see a monster. They didn't see an anti-hero. They saw their friend, tired and broken, but undeniably himself. He gave them a small, weary smile. You found me, he said. Let's go home. The arrival of Star and Stripe, America's #1 hero, was a beacon of hope in a world shrouded in darkness. Her quirk, New Order, was a reality-bending power of immense scope. She came to Japan to face Shigaraki, who was now a walking catastrophe, his body a vessel for All for One. Their battle in the skies above Japan was legendary, but ultimately, Star and Stripe fell. In a final act of heroic sacrifice, she used New Order to set a rule that would poison All for One's stolen quirks, a final gambit that bought the world precious time. Izuku, now back with his friends and in complete mastery of his abilities, witnessed her sacrifice. He felt her indomitable will, her absolute dedication to protecting people. It resonated with the hero he had finally become. He demonstrated his new control in the skirmishes that followed. Where he once would have used dismantle to kill, he now used it with surgical precision to disarm villains or destroy their support structures without harming a single civilian. He could now cast his domain expansion Malevolent Shrine, not as a field of guaranteed death, but as a field of guaranteed effect. He created a shrine that unleashed infinite, non-lethal cursed energy attacks that instantly incapacitated every villain in a 200-meter radius without leaving a scratch. He turned a weapon of mass slaughter into a tool of mass salvation. The other heroes who had once feared him now looked at him with awe and respect. He was no longer a dangerous variable, he was their greatest hope. The discovery that Yuga Aoyama was the UA traitor sent shockwaves through the class. But Izuku's reaction surprised everyone. He felt no anger, only a profound sadness. He understood what it was like to be manipulated, to have your body and will used by a force greater than yourself. Instead of judgment, he offered compassion. He spoke to Aoyama not as a traitor, but as a victim. He used the tactical knowledge he had inherited from Sukuna not to plan a battle, but to devise a strategy to protect Aoyama and his family from All for One's retribution, and to use the traitor's connection as a double-edged sword against the villain. His leadership, once born of fear, was now forged in empathy. He united his class, turning a moment of betrayal into a demonstration of unbreakable trust. And then the final war began. It was a global conflict, with heroes from around the world joining the fight against the combined forces of All for One and a fully realized Tamura Shigaraki. Izuku was the tip of the spear. He was no longer just a powerful fighter. He was the strategic commander of the entire hero operation. Using Sukuna's centuries of combat knowledge, he directed the heroes with a prescience that seemed like precognition, countering All for One's every move, minimizing casualties, and creating openings. His final confrontation with All for One was inevitable. They met on the floating ruins of UA High, the school that had been the stage for his entire journey. "You have exceeded all my expectations," All for One said, his voice laced with a strange mix of pride and fury. "You have conquered the King of Curses. You have truly become the perfect vessel." "I am not your vessel," Izuku stated, his voice calm, forearms manifesting behind him, not with rage, but with serene control. "I am the hero who is going to stop you." Their battle was a clash of gods, but Izuku's mastery was absolute. He used All for One's own stolen quirks against him, predicting their use before the villain even thought of them. The true final battle, however, was against Tamura Shigaraki, the boy who had been groomed by hate, his body twisted and warped into the ultimate weapon of destruction. He was a force of nature, his decay quirk capable of turning cities to dust. As they fought, a clash that shattered the very sky, Izuku did not aim to kill. He pushed past the monster, past the decay, past the hatred, and he reached for the crying child still trapped within. He used his power not to destroy Shigaraki, but to hold him together, to fight the influence of All for One that was consuming him. He used his domain expansion one last time. He created a malevolent shrine, not of death, but of peace. Inside its bounds, all quirks, all cursed energy were nullified. It was just him and Tenko Shimura, the boy with the itchy neck. In that quiet space, he didn't offer a punch. He offered a hand. He chose to save the man, not destroy the monster. It was the ultimate act of heroism, a choice that broke the cycle of hatred and violence that All for One had perpetuated for a century. By saving his greatest enemy, he defeated the true evil. He emerged from the war not just as the strongest, but as the new symbol of peace. A symbol forged not in smiles or power, but in unbreakable, compassionate will. Years later, the world was different. It was healing. Izuku Midoriya, the #1 hero, was a different kind of symbol. He wasn't a distant, untouchable icon like All Might. He was a presence, a leader, a teacher. He stood before a class of new UA first years, his expression calm and gentle. The four-armed, crimson-eyed demon was a distant memory, a story whispered in history books, but the power remained, a quiet, humming ocean within him, completely under his command. He could still use every technique, but he rarely needed to. His presence alone was enough to deter most threats. Katsuki Bakugo was the #2 hero. Their rivalry had evolved into a deep, unspoken partnership. They were the twin pillars of the new hero age, their explosive power and quiet strength a perfect balance. The rest of Class 1A were top-ranked pros, a legendary team who often worked together, their bonds forged in fire and war. Izuku often visited a grown-up Eri, who now had perfect control of her quirk and worked as a healer. She was a living testament to his journey, a symbol of the hope he had protected. Sometimes in the quiet moments before dawn, as he stood atop a skyscraper watching over his city, he would reflect. He would feel the vast, ancient power coiled within him, the echoes of a fallen king. But there was no voice, no malice, there was only silence. He had faced the ultimate evil, both in the world and within himself, and he had won by choosing not to destroy, but to understand. He had accepted every part of himself, the dark and the light, and in doing so had achieved a peace he once thought impossible. He was Izuku Midoriya. He was the boy who was told he couldn't be a hero. He was the boy who was given the power of a demon. He was the man who had mastered it, who had redefined what it meant to be strong, and who had become the greatest hero the world had ever known. Not by being flawless, but by being whole.
And there you have it, the complete journey of Izuku Midoriya, from victim to monster to the hero the world truly needed. This wasn't just a story about power, it was about choice. About proving that even with darkness inside you, even when everyone fears you, you can still choose to be the light the world needs. Deku didn't just become the strongest hero, he redefined what strength really means. If this story made you question everything you thought you knew about heroes and villains, smash that like button. And if you want to see more twisted takes on your favorite anime, hit subscribe, because we're just getting started. The King of Curses may be gone, but his legacy lives on in the hero who conquered him. Until next time, remember, true power isn't about what you can destroy. It's about what you choose to protect.